The NATO Secretary General is reported to have admitted that the number of so-called green-on-blue attacks in Afghanistan has damaged relations between Afghan security forces and ISAF. The comments in the Guardian newspaper come after almost 50 coalition deaths in such attacks this year. Former Grenadier Guard Patrick Hennessey mentored the Afghan National Army in 2007 and has just written a book, Kandak, designed to give Afghan soldiers a voice. When he came in earlier, he told me why.
Well, I think actually there was a slight element of guilt. I'd written my first book about my time in the army, and I went back and saw the Afghan soldiers I'd been with and realised no one was writing about them in as much detail, and you never heard their thoughts on what they were doing. And
what was it you wanted to convey about them?
Well, I think we put people in brackets, so we talk about the Afghan Army or the Afghan National Security Forces, and it was really annoying when I was in the army if people talked about British soldiers as if everyone thought in the same way, and I just wanted to try and put some of that individualism across and to see these were different guys in different situations.
The heart of the book is about mutual trust. How difficult was that for you when you went on tour in 2007, and how did it change when you went for your book?
Yeah, well, this is what's so interesting at the moment. In 2007, it really wasn't a problem. We had differences in how we conducted ourselves militarily, and there was a big training task, but it never occurred to me that we were going to be at any risk from the Afghans.
So you completely trusted your Afghan
We completely trusted them. We shared, you know, we lived in the same kind of FOBs, we went on patrol together, we slept on the same vehicles together. It never occurred that there was the element of risk we're seeing now. Now, I went back in 2009 and 2010, and worries were starting to show. The Afghan security forces had grown, and that was maybe having a factor. But what we're now seeing, I think, is something different again. It's a sort of end game where the trust relationship, which was so key to any success we did have, is completely being eroded.
And you allude to that in the book, that at a time when you were about to go on an R&R yourself, that was the only time when you felt there was a bit of edginess in the relationship with your Afghan counterparts. What was it about that, and perhaps about the deadline which is causing this now, do you think?
I think it brought into focus for the Afghans that they were kind of being left behind and that we were temporary. And one of the guys in the book, Kiam, who was this inspirational, fearsome fighter, a slightly terrifying guy at times, he once said to me, you know, look, at least the Russians built roads and power stations and we thought they were here to stay. We know you're not here to stay. You've come in canvas tents and you're just going to go home and leave us behind. Now, 2014 effectively says that very clearly. It's a big red cross on the map. And so guys under pressure, guys already at the end of their tether, guys for whom maybe cultural differences and friction within a small unit has worked up to a point of near breaking, something like that can be all that's required to snap, and then you get these terrible situations occurring.
Indeed. And in the book you quote from T. Lawrence, who from his experience in dealings with Arabs concluded basically better to let them train themselves rather than impose our standards and then leave. Is that something you think applies to Afghanistan?
I think it's about finding a balance. You know, the Afghan National Army that I started working with in 2007 was not a force that could have stood on its own and withheld Taliban attacks. It's clear that large elements of the security forces now can do that, but we can't create an Afghan security force in the model of ISAF because it would cease to be Afghan, and they will always be better doing certain things their way than trying to do ours.
On that note, are you pessimistic or optimistic about the future?
Well, I think it's very difficult to be optimistic in an outright sense, but I think we can always look for some things that are positive. The problem is that perhaps we've come to the point where what is in the best interests of the British and the British Army is not necessarily what's in the best interests of Afghanistan. There's a really difficult, well, meaning I'm sure most of the guys out there would quite like to come home, and meaning most of the British public clearly can't see any advantage to Britain in us being out there. And I think that's very difficult to argue with. But there's a more overarching moral question of, well, that may be true, but what happens to Afghanistan if you just pull out unilaterally, if you speed up pulling out processes, if you try and abandon it? And I think it's maybe a slightly old-fashioned view, but I think we do owe something to those people. And I think we're moving towards a country that you can leave, but we're certainly not there yet.
Patrick, thanks for your time.
Thank you very much.